The bass thrummed through my chest as I stepped into Crimson Nights, the club's red neon casting shadows across familiar walls. 2 years of careful planning had led to this moment. Marcus Sterling stood near the VIP section, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing attention from every corner of the room. He didn't recognize me in my casual jeans and simple black top. To him, I was just another face in the crowd. But when his cold eyes locked onto mine with territorial aggression, I knew the game had finally begun. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping closer with his security detail flanking him like wolves. His voice carried the same arrogant authority that once destroyed my life, expecting immediate submission from someone he assumed was beneath him. The question hit me like a physical blow, transporting me back to that devastating morning 2 years ago when my entire world collapsed. Marcus Sterling had been my business partner, my equal in building Sterling & Associates Entertainment Consulting from absolutely nothing. We had started in my cramped studio apartment, surviving on coffee and determination, while we pitched our vision to skeptical venue owners across Chicago. I provided the creative strategies that transformed failing businesses into thriving entertainment destinations, while Marcus handled operations and client relations with his natural charm. Those early months felt magical. We worked 18-hour days without complaint, celebrating every small victory with cheap champagne and dreams of empire building. Marcus would bring me takeout when I forgot to eat, and I would cover for him when he struggled with the technical aspects of contract negotiations. Our professional partnership gradually blossomed into something deeper, though we never officially acknowledged the romantic tension that sparked during those late nights planning marketing campaigns and venue redesigns. I trusted him completely. When he suggested incorporating shell companies for tax advantages, I signed the paperwork without hesitation. When he recommended transferring certain client contracts to his name for liability protection, I agreed immediately. Every suggestion seemed logical, every explanation reasonable. Marcus had a gift for making complex financial maneuvers sound like simple common sense. The betrayal unfolded slowly, then all at once. First came the mysterious client meetings I was suddenly excluded from, with Marcus explaining they preferred dealing with a single point of contact. Then, important documents began requiring only his signature, which he claimed streamlined our approval process. I noticed subtle changes in his behavior, moments of secretiveness that replaced our former transparency, but I attributed them to normal business growing pains. The morning everything shattered started like any other. I arrived at our office expecting to review contracts for 3 new venues we had been courting for months. Instead, I found empty desks and a security guard who informed me the space was no longer leased to Sterling & Associates. My key card had been deactivated. My nameplate was gone from the door. Even my personal coffee mug had vanished from the break room. Marcus appeared as I stood in the hallway, confusion and panic rising in my throat. His expression held no warmth, no recognition of our partnership or personal connection. He handed me a manila envelope with the casual indifference of someone delivering unwanted mail. Inside were legal documents showing that Sterling & Associates Entertainment Consulting had been dissolved with all assets and client contracts transferred to a new entity called Sterling Entertainment Solutions. My signature appeared on every page, though I had no memory of signing a single document. The forged signatures were perfect replicas clearly created by someone with access to my personal files and enough samples to practice. Marcus had been planning this theft for months, maybe even from the beginning of our partnership. Every shared meal, every late-night strategy session, every moment I thought we were building something together had been part of his elaborate deception. I hired 3 different lawyers, spending my life savings on legal fees that ultimately led nowhere. Marcus had covered his tracks expertly, creating a paper trail that made me appear to be a disgruntled former employee rather than a founding partner. Client testimonials supported his version of events, claiming I had been merely a consultant rather than an equal owner. Former employees suddenly remembered me as difficult to work with and unreliable in crucial situations. Within 6 months, I lost my apartment when I couldn't make rent. My car was repossessed after I defaulted on payments. Credit cards were maxed out paying legal bills that produced no results. I moved back in with my parents for the first time since college, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, while Marcus expanded our stolen business into an entertainment empire worth millions. The darkest moment came when I saw him featured on the cover of Chicago Business Magazine, posed confidently in front of the Sterling Entertainment Solutions logo. The article praised his innovative approach to venue consulting and his remarkable success as a young entrepreneur. Not a single mention of my contributions appeared anywhere in the 3-page profile. To the business world, I had simply never existed. But standing here now, watching Marcus swagger through my club with his expensive suit and entitled attitude, I felt only cold satisfaction. He had no idea that the broken woman he destroyed had spent every day of the past 2 years rebuilding herself into something far more dangerous than he could imagine. "I asked you a question," Marcus repeated, his voice growing sharper as I remained silent. "This is a private establishment with very exclusive clientele. If you don't belong here, you need to leave immediately." His bodyguards stepped closer, 2 massive men in black suits who clearly specialized in intimidation rather than conversation. Jake and Tony I remembered from my research, former college football players who had found lucrative careers in corporate muscle work. Behind the bar, Sarah wiped down glasses with nervous energy, her eyes darting between Marcus and me as tension filled the air. Regular customers began backing away from our confrontation, sensing the potential for violence in Marcus's aggressive posture. A group of young professionals who had been celebrating a promotion quickly settled their tab and headed for the exit. The dance floor gradually emptied as word spread about the disturbance near the VIP section. Marcus opened his leather briefcase with theatrical precision, revealing stacks of cash and legal documents. "I'm here to make the owner of this establishment an offer they cannot refuse," he announced loudly enough for nearby patrons to hear. "This place has potential, but it needs the kind of professional management that only Sterling Entertainment Solutions can provide." My heart pounded as I realized Marcus was planning to buy my club, completely unaware that he was speaking to its actual owner. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me laugh. After stealing my first business, he now wanted to purchase my second one, thinking it belonged to someone else entirely. The cash in his briefcase represented his attempt at a hostile takeover, the same aggressive tactics he used throughout the industry to eliminate competition. "Remove this nobody!" Marcus snapped his fingers at his bodyguards, his patience finally exhausted. "We have serious business to conduct, and I won't have random customers interfering with legitimate negotiations." I maintained my composure as Jake and Tony approached their massive frames, designed to intimidate anyone who might challenge their employer's authority. Instead of backing down, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text message under the pretense of checking the time. The message went to David Rodriguez, my head of security, alerting him to activate our surveillance protocols and position his team strategically throughout the venue. "Actually, I'm quite interested in hearing about your business proposal," I said, injecting just enough nervousness into my voice to satisfy Marcus's ego. "I've never seen someone make such an impressive offer before. Would you mind explaining how your company operates?" Marcus's aggressive posture shifted slightly as he registered my apparent submission. His bodyguards relaxed fractionally, though they remained close enough to intervene if necessary. The predatory smile that crossed his face reminded me exactly why I had fallen for his charm 2 years ago, and why that same charm had proven so effective in destroying my life. Sterling Entertainment Solutions specializes in acquiring underperforming venues and transforming them into profitable enterprises. Marcus began, his voice taking on the smooth cadence he used during sales presentations. "We provide comprehensive management services, from staff training to marketing strategies to financial restructuring." As he spoke, I asked carefully crafted questions designed to sound innocent while encouraging him to reveal information about his business practices. Each inquiry was framed as genuine curiosity from someone impressed by his obvious success and expertise. "How do you handle existing employees during these acquisitions?" I asked, tilting my head with feigned naivety. "Existing staff are evaluated on merit," Marcus replied, his tone suggesting this was a generous policy. "Those who demonstrate loyalty and competence are retained. Others are replaced with more qualified personnel from our extensive network of industry professionals." Translation: anyone who might question his methods gets fired immediately, while compliant employees are kept under strict surveillance. I had seen this pattern repeated at every venue he acquired, leaving trails of unemployed workers who discovered their former jobs had been given to Marcus's personal associates at reduced wages. What about financial arrangements with previous owners? I continued maintaining my innocent expression. Marcus's eyes lit up as he warmed to his favorite subject. We offer fair market value for properties, though our evaluations are based on current performance rather than unrealistic potential projections. Many owners are surprised to discover their venues are worth less than they imagined, but we provide generous terms that allow for quick, hassle-free transactions. The translation was even more sinister. Marcus deliberately targeted struggling businesses, used manipulated financial data to justify lowball offers, then pressured desperate owners into accepting deals that left them with virtually nothing. His legal team specialized in finding loopholes that voided warranty clauses and liability protections, leaving sellers with no recourse when they discovered the true value of what they had lost. During our conversation, Detective Rodriguez entered the club wearing civilian clothes and positioned himself at a corner table with a clear view of our interaction. Marcus noticed the newcomer but showed no recognition, though his paranoid nature made him suspicious of anyone who seemed to be paying attention to his business activities. There seemed to be a lot of interesting characters here tonight, Marcus observed, glancing toward Rodriguez with narrowed eyes. I hope the current management maintains proper security screening for their clientele. Before I could respond, Amanda Chen arrived with obvious urgency written across her usually composed features. As Marcus's financial advisor and money laundering specialist, Amanda typically maintained perfect professional calm regardless of circumstances. Seeing her flustered expression sent immediate alarm bells through my system. Marcus, we need to discuss the Chicago situation privately, Amanda whispered, though her voice carried far enough for me to overhear. The numbers from this week are significantly worse than our initial projections. Marcus's face paled as he registered the implications of Amanda's statement. Chicago represented one of his largest operations, a network of interconnected venues that generated substantial revenue through creative bookkeeping practices and cash-intensive transactions. Problems in Chicago meant problems throughout his entire empire. How much worse? Marcus asked, his voice dropping to barely audible levels. Amanda glanced around nervously before responding. Federal investigators have been asking questions about our reporting procedures. Several employees have been contacted for interviews. The situation requires immediate attention and possibly emergency asset protection protocols. The blood drained from Marcus's face as he realized the scope of the crisis developing around his business operations. Federal investigations meant serious criminal charges, potentially including racketeering and conspiracy charges that could result in decades of prison time. Emergency asset protection protocols were code words for hiding money and evidence before law enforcement could freeze accounts and seize property. I maintained my innocent expression while internally celebrating this unexpected development. My own investigation into Marcus's activities had uncovered evidence of financial irregularities, but I had not realized federal authorities were already building their own case against him. This convergence of legal pressure created opportunities I had not anticipated in my original planning. I think there might be some confusion about which establishment you're trying to purchase, I said, carefully watching Marcus's stress levels continue rising. Perhaps you could clarify exactly which venue you're interested in acquiring. Marcus turned his attention back to me with obvious irritation, his previous charm completely replaced by barely controlled panic. This club, obviously. Crimson Knights. I've been monitoring its performance for months and identified significant opportunities for improvement under proper management. His phone rang at that moment, the sound cutting through club music like a knife. Marcus glanced at the caller ID, and his expression shifted from stress to pure terror. The name on the screen was Vincent Castellano, a loan shark known throughout Chicago for collecting debts through increasingly violent methods. Marcus answered the call with trembling hands, moving slightly away from our group, but not far enough to prevent me from overhearing portions of the conversation. Vincent's voice carried clearly through the phone speaker, his tone suggesting this was not a friendly social call. Time's running out, Sterling. 800,000 by midnight, or we start collecting interest in ways you won't enjoy. My associates are already positioned throughout the city, waiting for my instructions. Marcus ended the call quickly, his hands shaking as he returned the phone to his jacket pocket. The confident businessman who had entered my club 30 minutes earlier was rapidly transforming into a desperate man facing multiple catastrophic crises simultaneously. Federal investigations, failing business operations, and violent debt collectors represented a perfect storm of destruction that would have challenged even the most seasoned criminal. "Everything all right?" I asked with false concern, noting how his bodyguards were beginning to question their employer's stability. "Fine, just routine business matters," Marcus replied unconvincingly, wiping perspiration from his forehead despite the club's air conditioning. "Now about this acquisition proposal, I'm prepared to offer immediate cash payment for a quick, no-questions-asked transaction." Amanda whispered something else in his ear, causing Marcus to glance around the club with increasing paranoia. His eyes lingered on Detective Rodriguez, whose casual demeanor clearly struck him as suspicious, given the timing of federal investigations into his operations. The walls were closing in on Marcus Sterling, and he was finally beginning to understand that his empire of lies and theft was crumbling around him. What he still didn't realize was that the woman standing in front of him, the woman he was treating like an irrelevant obstacle to his desperate acquisition plan, was the architect of his downfall. A commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention as Tommy Castellano, Vincent's primary enforcer, entered the club with 2 associates. The 3 men moved through the crowd with the predatory confidence of sharks sensing blood in the water. Tommy's reputation for creative violence was legendary throughout Chicago's underground financial world, and his presence meant Vincent had grown tired of waiting for payment. "Marcus!" Tommy called out, his voice carrying easily over the music. "Vincent wants an answer now." The atmosphere in Crimson Nights shifted dramatically as Tommy Castellano approached our group with purposeful strides. His associates flanked him at precise intervals, their positioning suggesting military or law enforcement training repurposed for criminal activities. Marcus's bodyguards instinctively moved to defensive positions, though their previous confidence had evaporated upon recognizing the notorious enforcer. I stepped back slightly, maintaining my facade as an innocent bystander while observing every detail of the unfolding confrontation. Tommy was younger than I had expected, probably early 30s, with the lean build of someone who preferred precision over brute force. His expensive suit and perfectly groomed appearance disguised the dangerous predator underneath a combination that made him particularly effective in Chicago's sophisticated criminal ecosystem. "We need to discuss your payment schedule," Tommy said conversationally, as if suggesting lunch plans rather than delivering threats of violence. "Vincent feels your current timeline lacks the urgency that $800,000 deserves." Marcus attempted to maintain his composure, but perspiration continued beading on his forehead despite his efforts to project confidence. "I told Vincent the money would be available by midnight. I'm in the middle of finalizing a significant acquisition that will provide the necessary liquidity." Tommy glanced around the club with obvious appreciation for its upscale atmosphere and profitable location. "Nice place. Vincent might be interested in discussing alternative payment arrangements if the cash flow timeline becomes problematic." The implied threat was crystal clear. If Marcus couldn't produce the money, Vincent would simply take the club as collateral along with any other assets he could identify and seize. This type of debt collection had become increasingly common as traditional loan sharks expanded into legitimate business acquisition through intimidation and violence. I realized this development created both opportunities and dangers for my plan. Marcus's desperation was accelerating beyond my carefully constructed timeline, potentially forcing him into reckless decisions that could compromise the evidence-gathering process. At the same time, the presence of Vincent's people provided additional witnesses to whatever confessions Marcus might make under pressure. "Actually, there seems to be some confusion about ownership," I interjected carefully, drawing everyone's attention. "I'm not sure this gentleman has the authority to make binding agreements about this establishment." Marcus whirled around to face me, his panic transforming into pure rage at my apparent interference. "What are you talking about? I'm conducting legitimate business negotiations here, and you're just some random customer who happened to overhear a private conversation." Tommy's interest was piqued by my statement, his predatory instincts recognizing potential complications in what should have been a straightforward debt collection situation. "Are you saying this place isn't available for acquisition?" Before I could respond, Marcus grabbed my arm with enough force to leave bruises, his desperation overriding any pretense of civilized behavior. Listen carefully, whoever you are. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you're interfering with serious business that could get you hurt. Walk away now and pretend you never saw or heard anything." Detective Rodriguez shifted position at his corner table, his hand moving subtly toward his concealed weapon as he observed Marcus's increasingly aggressive behavior. Other patrons continued evacuating the immediate area, sensing violence in the charged atmosphere surrounding our confrontation. I maintained my innocent expression while allowing genuine fear to show in my eyes, knowing that Marcus's ego required visible submission from those he considered inferior. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interfere. I was just confused about some of the legal terminology you were using." Legal terminology. Marcus's grip on my arm tightened as his paranoia reached new heights. "What do you know about legal issues? Are you some kind of reporter or investigator?" The question revealed just how deeply his criminal activities had affected his mental state. Marcus was seeing potential threats everywhere, unable to distinguish between genuine dangers and harmless coincidences. His empire of fraud and theft had created so many enemies that innocent interactions now appeared sinister to his corrupted perspective. Amanda Chen approached our group with obvious reluctance, her professional composure cracking under the pressure of multiple developing crises. "Marcus, we really need to discuss the federal situation privately. The Chicago interviews have expanded to include employee financial records and client transaction histories." Tommy's expression sharpened as he processed Amanda's statement. Vincent's organization had extensive experience with federal investigations, and they understood that associates of targeted individuals often became targets themselves. If Marcus was facing serious federal charges, his ability to repay debts would be permanently compromised regardless of any short-term asset liquidation. Federal situation. Tommy repeated his casual tone, not masking the increased threat level in his voice. "Vincent didn't mention anything about government complications when he sent me here tonight." Marcus realized his financial advisor had just revealed information that could trigger immediate and violent retaliation from his creditors. If Vincent's organization believed federal investigations threatened their ability to collect outstanding debts, they would likely accelerate their collection timeline dramatically. "It's just routine regulatory compliance issues," Marcus stammered, his lies becoming more transparent under extreme stress. "Nothing that affects my personal financial obligations or business acquisition capabilities." Tommy pulled out his phone and sent a quick text message, presumably updating Vincent about these unexpected complications. The response came within seconds, causing Tommy's expression to shift from casual interest to professional concern. "Change of plans," Tommy announced. "Vincent wants immediate payment tonight before any federal complications affect asset availability. No more midnight deadlines, no more acquisition strategies. Cash or equivalent assets transferred within the next 2 hours." The shortened timeline sent Marcus into barely controlled panic as he realized his carefully constructed escape plan was collapsing in real time. The club acquisition had been his strategy for obtaining clean assets that could be used to satisfy Vincent's demands while maintaining some operational capital for his other business ventures. Without time to complete the purchase, he faced the terrifying prospect of defaulting on a debt to one of Chicago's most dangerous criminals. "2 hours is impossible," Marcus protested, his voice cracking under the strain. "Asset liquidation requires proper documentation and regulatory compliance. Even expedited transactions need minimum processing time for legal protection." Tommy's smile contained no warmth as he processed Marcus's objections. "Vincent anticipated you might have scheduling difficulties. He's prepared to accept partial payment tonight, with the remainder secured through collateral agreements on your current business holdings." Translation: Vincent would take whatever cash Marcus could produce immediately, then seize control of his entire entertainment empire as guarantee for the remaining debt. This arrangement would effectively destroy everything Marcus had built, including the business he had stolen from me, while ensuring Vincent's organization maintained control over a profitable network of venues. I watched this negotiation with fascination, realizing that Marcus's greed and criminal behavior had created a situation where multiple dangerous forces were converging simultaneously. Federal investigators, violent creditors, and my own carefully planned revenge were all targeting the same man at the same time, creating a perfect storm of justice that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Marcus's phone buzzed with another incoming call, this time from an unknown number that caused him to hesitate before answering. When he finally accepted the call, his face went completely white as he recognized the caller's identity. "Mr. Sterling, this is Agent Foster with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding irregularities we've discovered in your business financial records. Would tomorrow morning at 9 be convenient, or would you prefer to arrange legal representation first?" The call was on speakerphone, loud enough for everyone in our immediate vicinity to hear Agent Foster's professional but ominous tone. Tommy and his associates exchanged meaningful glances as they realized the federal investigation was far more advanced than Marcus had admitted. Marcus ended the call without responding, his hands shaking so violently that he nearly dropped the phone. Every support structure in his carefully constructed criminal empire was simultaneously collapsing, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in ways he had never imagined possible. "Interesting timing," Tommy observed, his tone suggesting this was anything but coincidence. "Vincent's going to be very disappointed to learn about these federal complications." Marcus looked around the club with wild eyes, searching for escape routes or salvation that simply didn't exist. His bodyguards were beginning to distance themselves physically and emotionally, recognizing that their employer's situation was deteriorating beyond any possibility of recovery. Amanda Chen was already backing toward the exit, clearly planning to abandon ship before federal investigators could connect her to Marcus's criminal activities. Standing in the center of this chaos, watching the man who had destroyed my life face the consequences of his choices, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction beginning to build in my chest. Everything was proceeding even better than I had dared to hope, with Marcus's own greed and criminal behavior providing the instruments of his destruction. The only question remaining was how much more of his confession I could extract before he realized exactly who he was talking to, and how long he had been walking directly into my carefully prepared trap. "I think," I said quietly, "we should probably call the police about all this commotion. Someone might get hurt with all these dangerous people around." Marcus turned to stare at me with growing suspicion, finally beginning to sense that something about this entire situation was not what it appeared to be. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied my face with dawning suspicion, though he still couldn't place where he might have seen me before. The combination of federal pressure, criminal threats, and my seemingly innocent questions was pushing him toward a complete psychological breakdown that would serve my purposes perfectly. "Who exactly are you?" Marcus demanded again, his voice carrying a different quality than his earlier arrogant dismissal. "You're asking too many specific questions for someone who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." Before I could respond, the club's main entrance opened to admit a group of federal agents led by Agent Foster himself. They weren't here to arrest Marcus, at least not yet, but their presence would amplify his paranoia exponentially. The agents spread out through the venue with practiced efficiency, their official bearing causing immediate concern among patrons who had no idea what kind of investigation might be unfolding. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Agent Foster with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," the lead agent announced. "We're responding to reports of disturbances at this location. We'd like to speak with the owner or manager about ensuring public safety." Marcus's panic reached new heights as he realized federal agents were actively seeking the club's ownership information while he was in the middle of attempting to purchase the property through intimidation and cash payments that would be impossible to explain legally. His entire acquisition strategy depended on maintaining distance from law enforcement attention. Tommy and his associates immediately began moving toward side exits, having no desire to be present during federal questioning about their debt collection activities. Vincent's organization had survived decades of law enforcement scrutiny by avoiding unnecessary exposure, especially when federal agencies were involved. "This conversation isn't over," Tommy called to Marcus as he retreated. "Vincent expects his money within 2 hours, regardless of your other complications. Don't make this situation worse than it already is." The enforcer's departure left Marcus alone with his rapidly defecting bodyguards, his panicking financial advisor, and a club full of federal agents who were now actively investigating the very business he was trying to acquire. The irony was so perfect that I had to suppress a smile as I watched his entire world collapse in real time. Agent Foster approached our group with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with dangerous criminals. His presence immediately changed the power dynamic, with Marcus transforming from aggressive predator to nervous suspect under federal scrutiny. "I'm looking for the owner of this establishment," Agent Foster said, his gaze moving between Marcus and me. "We've received reports about potential criminal activity on these premises." Marcus stepped forward with forced confidence, clearly hoping to gain some control over the situation by positioning himself as a legitimate businessman rather than someone under federal investigation. "I'm Marcus Sterling, owner of Sterling Entertainment Solutions. I'm currently in negotiations to acquire this property." Agent Foster's expression sharpened with recognition as he heard Marcus's name and company affiliation. "Mr. Sterling, you're exactly who we've been hoping to speak with. Your business practices have generated significant interest from our white-collar crime division." The statement hung in the air like a death sentence, as Marcus realized his attempt to appear legitimate had instead confirmed his identity to federal investigators who were already building a case against him. His face went ashen as he understood that every word he spoke was likely being recorded and analyzed for future prosecution. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Marcus stammered. "Sterling Entertainment Solutions operates within all applicable legal frameworks and maintains full compliance with regulatory requirements." I decided this was the perfect moment to escalate his stress levels even further by asking another seemingly innocent question. "Agent Foster, what exactly constitutes criminal activity in the entertainment venue business? I'm curious about the legal requirements for club ownership." My question served multiple purposes. It demonstrated my apparent ignorance of the situation, while encouraging Agent Foster to explain federal interest in Marcus's activities, and it pushed Marcus closer to the breaking point where he might reveal incriminating information. Property acquisition through fraudulent means, money laundering through cash-intensive businesses, and racketeering involving multiple venues across state lines, Agent Foster replied, his eyes never leaving Marcus's increasingly pale face. "These activities fall under federal jurisdiction and carry severe penalties." Each item on Agent Foster's list corresponded directly to Marcus's actual criminal activities, making it clear that federal investigators had developed detailed knowledge of his business operations. The mention of interstate racketeering suggested they had identified connections between his Chicago operations and venues in other cities, indicating a much broader investigation than Marcus had realized. Amanda Chen took this opportunity to distance herself from her employer by moving toward the exit while pulling out her phone to call what was presumably her personal attorney. Her departure left Marcus increasingly isolated as his support structure continued crumbling around him. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Marcus said desperately. "I'm simply a legitimate businessman trying to expand my entertainment consulting services through proper legal channels." Agent Foster consulted his notes before responding. "Our investigation has identified irregularities in your acquisition of Sterling and Associates Entertainment Consulting 2 years ago. The original co-owner filed complaints about forged documents and fraudulent asset transfers that were never properly resolved." My heart pounded as I realized federal investigators had reopened the case surrounding Marcus's theft of my business. The original police reports and civil lawsuits had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence, but federal resources and expertise could potentially uncover the sophisticated fraud that local authorities had missed. Marcus's expression shifted from panic to pure terror as he understood that his original crime, the theft that had launched his criminal empire, was under federal scrutiny. If investigators could prove fraud in that foundational transaction, every subsequent business acquisition would become evidence of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. "That situation was resolved through proper legal channels," Marcus protested, his voice growing increasingly shrill. "All documentation was reviewed and approved by qualified legal counsel." "Forged signatures and fabricated contracts don't become legitimate just because lawyers review them," Agent Foster replied coldly. "Fraud is fraud regardless of how sophisticated the presentation." I couldn't resist pushing Marcus even further toward complete breakdown by asking another strategic question. What happens to someone who uses forged documents to steal a business from their partner? That sounds like a terrible thing to do to someone you trusted. Marcus whirled around to stare at me with wild eyes. His paranoia now focused directly on my seemingly innocent questions that kept hitting precisely on his most vulnerable criminal activities. "Why are you so interested in specific legal scenarios? What's your connection to any of this?" His question revealed that he was finally beginning to suspect I might be more than just a random customer who happened to be present during his criminal negotiations. However, his stressed mental state was preventing him from making the logical connections that would reveal my true identity. Agent Foster stepped between Marcus and me. his professional instincts recognizing potential witness intimidation in Marcus's aggressive behavior. "Sir, I need you to step away from this woman and keep your hands where I can see them." The federal agent's intervention provided perfect protection while demonstrating Marcus's increasingly violent tendencies under pressure. Every action he took was creating additional evidence of criminal behavior that could be used against him in future prosecution. Detective Rodriguez chose this moment to approach from his corner table, revealing his own law enforcement credentials to Agent Foster, while maintaining his cover relative to Marcus. The coordination between local and federal authorities suggested a much more comprehensive investigation than anyone had realized. "Detective Rodriguez, Chicago PD." He introduced himself to Agent Foster. "I've been conducting surveillance on this individual for several weeks as part of an ongoing investigation into organized criminal activity." Marcus's legs nearly gave out as he realized law enforcement agencies at multiple levels had been watching him for extended periods. His carefully constructed criminal empire had been under systematic scrutiny while he remained completely unaware of the gathering storm. "Surveillance," Marcus repeated weakly. "What kind of surveillance? I haven't done anything illegal." Detective Rodriguez consulted his own notes before responding. "Money laundering, racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and now potential assault on a civilian witness. The list keeps growing." My phone buzzed with the text message from David Rodriguez, my head of security, confirming that all surveillance systems were recording everything, and that additional security personnel were positioned throughout the venue. Every word of Marcus's confession was being documented through multiple independent sources. Standing in the center of this convergence of law enforcement attention, watching Marcus Sterling face the consequences of 2 years of criminal behavior, I felt the deep satisfaction of justice finally beginning to unfold. His arrogance and greed had created the perfect trap, and he was walking deeper into it with every desperate word he spoke. The only question remaining was how much more incriminating evidence he would provide before he realized that the woman he was threatening and intimidating was the same woman whose life he had destroyed 2 years ago and whose careful planning had orchestrated every aspect of his current downfall. Marcus grabbed my arm again, his desperation overriding any concern about federal agents watching his every move. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Tell me who you are and what you want, or I'll make sure you regret interfering with my business." The threat was delivered in front of multiple law enforcement officers, creating perfect evidence of witness intimidation while pushing Marcus closer to the complete confession I needed to destroy him forever. Marcus's grip on my arm tightened as his desperation reached critical levels, his rational thinking completely overwhelmed by the convergence of federal investigation, criminal threats, and mounting paranoia. Agent Foster moved closer, his hand resting on his weapon, as Marcus's behavior became increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous. "Sir, release the woman immediately and step back," Agent Foster commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of federal law enforcement. "You're already under investigation for multiple felonies. Don't add assault and witness intimidation to your charges." Instead of complying, Marcus's psychological breakdown accelerated as he realized his attempts to control the situation were only making everything worse. His grip on my arm became painful enough to leave clear bruises, providing perfect evidence of assault in front of multiple witnesses. "You don't understand," Marcus said wildly, his eyes darting between Agent Foster and Detective Rodriguez. "This woman is asking too many specific questions. She knows things she shouldn't know. She's part of some kind of setup." His paranoid accusations were actually correct, though his stressed mental state prevented him from recognizing the full scope of the trap he had walked into. I maintained my frightened, innocent expression while internally celebrating his increasing desperation. "Please let go," I said in a trembling voice that carried clearly through the club. "I was just curious about business procedures. I don't know anything about criminal investigations or legal problems." Agent Foster stepped forward with obvious intent to physically separate Marcus from me, but I made a subtle gesture, indicating I wanted to continue the interaction. My plan required Marcus to reveal specific information about his criminal activities, and his current psychological state made him vulnerable to strategic questioning. "What kinds of things do you think I know?" I asked, allowing genuine curiosity to color my apparent fear. "I'm just a regular person trying to understand how business acquisitions work." Marcus's response exceeded my most optimistic expectations, as his paranoia and desperation combined to create a perfect storm of confession. You're asking about forged documents and fraudulent contracts like you know something specific about my business history. Nobody asks those kinds of detailed questions unless they have inside information. Detective Rodriguez activated his recording device as Marcus began revealing details about his criminal activities without any prompting from law enforcement. The confession was happening voluntarily, making it completely admissible in future prosecution. What business history? I pressed gently. Are you saying you've actually used forged documents and fraudulent contracts in previous deals? The question pushed Marcus over the edge of rational thought as his desperation to identify the threat I represented overwhelmed his survival instincts. In his stressed mental state, proving his suspicions about my knowledge seemed more important than protecting himself from self-incrimination. 2 years ago, I had a business partner who thought she was smarter than everyone else. Marcus said, his voice carrying the cruel satisfaction of someone reliving a successful betrayal. Helen Parker believed we were equal partners, but she was just a naive idealist who made it easy to take everything she had built. My heart pounded as Marcus began confessing the details of my destruction while staring directly into my face, completely unaware that he was speaking to his victim. The irony was so perfect that I had to fight to maintain my composure while he revealed the sophisticated fraud that had destroyed my life. She trusted me completely. Marcus continued his confession, gaining momentum as he found relief in finally speaking about his greatest criminal achievement. Signing documents without reading them, accepting my explanations for every financial maneuver, even giving me access to her personal files that made forging her signature simple. Agent Foster and Detective Rodriguez exchanged meaningful looks as Marcus provided detailed admission of fraud, forgery, and theft that corresponded exactly to the federal investigation into his original criminal activities. Every word was creating evidence that would guarantee his eventual conviction. What happened to her? I asked, though I already knew the answer from personal experience. Marcus's smile was genuinely cruel as he remembered my destruction with obvious pleasure. Lost everything. Apartment, car, credit rating, reputation. She tried hiring lawyers, but I had covered my tracks too well. By the time she realized what happened, Sterling and Associates Entertainment Consulting belonged to me completely. The casual cruelty in his voice as he described ruining my life revealed the true nature of the man I had once trusted and loved. He wasn't just a criminal motivated by greed, but someone who genuinely enjoyed inflicting suffering on people who had shown him kindness and loyalty. She actually came crawling back, begging me to admit what I had done. Marcus continued, lost in his memories of triumph. Crying about justice and fairness like those concepts meant anything in the real world. I told her to consider it a valuable lesson about trusting the wrong people. Detective Rodriguez was recording every word while Agent Foster observed Marcus's body language and emotional state. Both law enforcement officers recognized they were witnessing a complete confession to multiple federal crimes delivered voluntarily by someone too psychologically compromised to protect his own interests. That sounds incredibly cruel, I said, allowing genuine emotion to enter my voice for the first time. What kind of person destroys someone who trusted them completely? Marcus's response revealed the depth of his sociopathic personality as he failed to recognize any moral problems with his behavior. Smart people take advantage of opportunities when they're presented. Helen Parker was weak and trusting, which made her the perfect target for someone willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. His words confirmed everything I had suspected about his motivations during the darkest period of my recovery. Marcus hadn't stolen my business out of desperation or circumstance, but because he enjoyed the process of betraying trust and destroying lives. The theft had been carefully planned and executed by someone who found satisfaction in inflicting psychological torture. But what if she found out what you did and decided to get revenge? I asked, pushing him toward the revelation that would complete my victory. Smart women can be very dangerous when they've been betrayed and humiliated. Marcus's laugh contained no humor as he dismissed the possibility of any consequences for his actions. Helen Parker was completely broken by what I did to her. Last I heard, she was living with her parents like a failure, probably working some minimum wage job and struggling with depression. She doesn't have the intelligence or resources to threaten anyone. The depth of his contempt was shocking, even though I had anticipated it based on his previous behavior. Marcus genuinely believed he had destroyed me so thoroughly that I could never recover, let alone become capable of sophisticated revenge. His arrogance blinded him to any possibility that his victim might have spent 2 years becoming someone far more dangerous than he could imagine. Agent Foster stepped forward as Marcus's confession reached natural conclusion. "Mr. Sterling, based on what you've just admitted, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." But I wasn't finished with Marcus Sterling yet. His confession had provided the evidence needed for his conviction, but I wanted him to understand exactly how thoroughly he had underestimated the woman whose life he had destroyed. "Before Agent Foster continues," I said quietly, my voice carrying a new tone that caused everyone to pay attention, "I think Marcus should know exactly who he's been talking to for the past hour." Marcus turned to look at me with dawning suspicion, as something in my demeanor finally triggered recognition. His face went completely white as the pieces began falling into place, though he still couldn't quite accept what his eyes were telling him. "My name," I said clearly, looking directly into his terrified eyes, "is Helen Parker." The words hung in the air like a physical force, transforming the entire atmosphere of Crimson Nights in an instant. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions as his brain struggled to process the impossible reality standing in front of him. The broken woman he had described with such cruel satisfaction was the same person who had been questioning him, manipulating him, and leading him toward complete confession for the past hour. "No!" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the club's background music. "That's impossible. Helen Parker was destroyed. She was broken completely. She couldn't possibly." His words trailed off as he stared into my eyes and finally saw the intelligence and strength he had been too arrogant to notice earlier. The frightened, innocent woman he thought he had been intimidating was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet power and absolute confidence. Agent Foster and Detective Rodriguez immediately understood the significance of my revelation, though they maintained their professional composure while observing Marcus's psychological collapse. They had just witnessed a complete confession delivered directly to the victim, creating an unprecedented level of evidence for prosecution. "Helen Parker." Detective Rodriguez repeated, his voice carrying satisfaction at seeing justice finally unfold. "The original owner of Sterling and Associates Entertainment Consulting and the current owner of Crimson Nights." Marcus's legs gave out entirely as he realized the scope of what had just happened. He sank onto a nearby bar stool, his entire body shaking, as he understood that every question I had asked, every piece of information I had extracted, and every moment of his confession had been part of a carefully orchestrated plan. "You planned this," he said in a voice filled with dawning horror. "All of it. The club, the timing, everything. You've been setting this up for months." I stepped closer to Marcus, allowing him to see the strength and determination that 2 years of careful planning had built within me. 2 years, I corrected quietly. "Every single day since you destroyed my life, I've been working toward this moment." The transformation in my demeanor was complete as I dropped all pretense of vulnerability and allowed Marcus to see exactly who I had become. The broken woman he remembered no longer existed, replaced by someone who had turned her pain into power and her victimization into victory. "The surveillance system in this club has been recording everything," I continued, gesturing toward the nearly invisible cameras positioned throughout the venue. "Every threat you made, every confession you delivered, every detail about your criminal activities, all of it documented in high-definition video and crystal-clear audio." Marcus followed my gaze to the cameras he had never noticed, understanding finally dawning that his entire criminal empire had been exposed through his own arrogant admissions. The technology I had installed specifically for this confrontation had captured evidence that would guarantee his conviction on multiple federal charges. David Rodriguez. My head of security emerged from his concealed position near the VIP section and approached our group with professional efficiency. His presence revealed another layer of the planning that had gone into this moment, showing Marcus just how thoroughly he had been surrounded and monitored. "All security protocols completed successfully," David reported to me with obvious satisfaction. "Every conversation has been recorded from multiple angles with backup systems ensuring nothing was lost. The evidence package is already being prepared for transfer to federal authorities." Agent Foster accepted a preliminary copy of the recordings with obvious appreciation for their thoroughness and legal admissibility. "This level of documentation will make prosecution significantly easier. We rarely see this quality of evidence in white-collar crime cases." Marcus looked around the club with new understanding, finally seeing the sophisticated operation that had been constructed specifically to expose his criminal activities. Every detail he had missed, every person he had failed to identify correctly, every assumption he had made about the situation had been deliberately orchestrated to lead him toward this moment. "But how did you know I would come here?" Marcus asked desperately. "How could you possibly predict that I would try to buy this specific club tonight?" I smiled as I prepared to reveal the final layer of manipulation that had brought him directly into my trap. "Because I made sure you would discover that Crimson Knights was available for acquisition. The financial information you used to identify this as a profitable target came from sources I control. Every piece of data that led you here was carefully crafted to make this club irresistible to someone with your particular criminal interests." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow as he realized the scope of the deception that had ensnared him. Not only had I anticipated his attempt to acquire my business, I had actively manipulated him into targeting it by feeding him false information designed to trigger his predatory instincts. "The mysterious owner you thought you were negotiating with," I continued, "the cash flow problems that made this club seem vulnerable, the timing that coincided perfectly with your federal investigation and debt collection crisis. None of it was coincidence. I orchestrated every element to converge simultaneously." Detective Rodriguez stepped forward with handcuffs as Agent Foster completed the formal arrest procedure. "Marcus Sterling, you're under arrest for fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering, and witness intimidation. Additional charges will likely be filed as the investigation continues." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Marcus looked at me with a mixture of terror, admiration, and complete defeat. The woman he had dismissed as weak and broken had proven to be far more intelligent and dangerous than he had ever imagined possible. "You've been planning this for 2 years, he said, his voice hollow with the recognition of total defeat. "Every move calculated, every detail anticipated. I never had a chance." I felt no satisfaction in his fear, only the deep peace of justice finally being served. "You made one critical mistake, Marcus. You assumed that destroying someone's life would leave them too broken to fight back. You never considered that pain could become strength, or that victimization could become motivation." Agent Foster began leading Marcus toward the exit, as federal procedures required immediate processing at their downtown facility. The man who had entered my club with such arrogance and entitlement was leaving in handcuffs, his entire criminal empire exposed, and his future reduced to decades of federal prison time. "Wait!" Marcus called it out desperately as reality sank in completely. "Helen, you have to understand, I never meant for things to go so far. The business theft was just an opportunity that presented itself. I didn't plan to destroy your life so completely." His attempt at reconciliation revealed the same manipulation and dishonesty that had characterized every interaction I had ever had with him. Even facing complete defeat, Marcus couldn't bring himself to accept responsibility for the calculated cruelty he had inflicted. "You told Agent Foster and Detective Rodriguez exactly what you meant to do," I replied calmly. "You described destroying my life as your greatest achievement and expressed satisfaction at my supposed suffering. Your own words condemn you more effectively than anything I could say." As federal agents escorted Marcus Sterling out of Crimson Knights forever, I stood in the center of my club surrounded by law enforcement officers who had witnessed perfect justice unfold through careful planning and Marcus's own arrogant confessions. 2 years of patient preparation had culminated in a victory more complete than I had dared to dream possible. The woman who had been broken and destroyed had not only survived, but had transformed her pain into the instrument of her oppressor's downfall. Marcus Sterling would spend decades in federal prison, while Helen Parker would spend the rest of her life knowing that justice had been served through intelligence, determination, and the power of refusing to accept defeat. Detective Rodriguez approached me as the federal agents completed their arrest procedures. "Ms. Parker, this has been one of the most satisfying investigations of my career. Watching someone like Marcus Sterling face the consequences of his actions through his victim's intelligence and planning restores faith in justice." I looked around my club, seeing it now not as a business venture, but as a symbol of transformation and recovery. Every detail of its design and operation represented my journey from victim to victor, from broken woman to powerful entrepreneur who had turned her greatest tragedy into her most significant triumph. "Justice isn't always about the legal system," I replied, feeling the deep satisfaction of knowing that Marcus would never hurt anyone the way he had hurt me. Sometimes it's about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your future and finding the strength to transform your pain into your power. 6 months after Marcus Sterling's arrest, I stood in the expanded VIP section of Crimson Nights, watching a celebration that would have been impossible to imagine during my darkest days of recovery. The club had become more than just a business success. It had transformed into a symbol of resilience that attracted people from across Chicago who had their own stories of overcoming betrayal and rebuilding their lives. Marcus's federal conviction had exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Agent Foster's team had used the evidence from our confrontation to uncover a criminal network spanning 7 states, involving dozens of fraudulent business acquisitions and millions of dollars in stolen assets. The sophisticated recording system I had installed in Crimson Nights provided the foundation for prosecuting not just Marcus, but his entire organization of accomplices and enablers. The sentencing hearing had been particularly satisfying. Marcus received 23 years in federal prison for racketeering, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. Judge Williams had specifically mentioned the cruelty Marcus showed toward his victims, noting that his confession to Agent Foster demonstrated a callous disregard for the lives he had destroyed through his criminal activities. Amanda Chen, Marcus's former financial advisor, had cooperated with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony revealed the full scope of Marcus's criminal empire, including detailed information about offshore accounts, shell companies, and falsified documentation that had enabled years of systematic theft. She received 8 years in federal prison and agreed to forfeit all assets derived from her participation in the conspiracy. Vincent Castellano's loan shark operation had been completely dismantled when federal investigators used Marcus's debt as an entry point into organized crime activities. Tommy and his associates were now serving their own federal sentences, and the network of illegal lending that had terrorized Chicago's business community for decades was permanently destroyed. But the most meaningful outcome was the impact on other victims of Marcus's criminal activities. The federal investigation had identified 47 different businesses that Marcus had acquired through fraudulent means over the past 5 years. Legal proceedings were ongoing to return stolen assets to their rightful owners, and a victim compensation fund had been established using seized assets from Marcus's organization. I had testified at length during Marcus's sentencing hearing not for revenge, but to ensure the judge understood the long-term psychological impact of his crimes on his victims. My testimony had helped secure maximum sentences while providing closure that years of civil litigation had failed to achieve. The recovery of my original business assets had been emotionally complex. Sterling & Associates Entertainment Consulting was returned to me along with substantial damages, but I chose to dissolve the company rather than attempting to rebuild it. The business represented a chapter of my life that needed to remain closed, a symbol of innocence and trust that could never be fully restored. Instead, I focused on expanding Crimson Nights into something far more significant than Marcus could have imagined. The club had become a gathering place for entrepreneurs, particularly women who had faced discrimination or betrayal in their professional lives. I had established a mentorship program connecting experienced business owners with women starting their own ventures, creating a support network that helped prevent others from experiencing the isolation I had endured. Detective Rodriguez had become more than just a law enforcement contact, developing into a genuine friend whose integrity and dedication reminded me that trustworthy people still existed in the world. He frequently brought other officers to the club for legitimate celebrations, helping to establish Crimson Nights as a respected establishment rather than just another entertainment venue. Agent Foster's team had recommended me for a civilian commendation recognizing my contribution to their investigation and my courage in exposing criminal activities that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. The recognition was meaningful not for the honor itself, but for the acknowledgement that victims could become agents of justice, rather than remaining passive recipients of sympathy. The psychological transformation I had undergone during 2 years of planning and preparation had fundamentally changed how I approached relationships and business decisions. I had learned to trust my instincts while maintaining appropriate caution to build genuine partnerships based on mutual respect rather than blind faith. Sarah, my bartender, who had witnessed the entire confrontation with Marcus, had become my operations manager after demonstrating exceptional loyalty and business insight. Her promotion represented my commitment to rewarding people who showed integrity under pressure, creating a workplace culture based on merit rather than manipulation. David Rodriguez. My head of security had expanded his role to include comprehensive safety consulting for other businesses owned by women in Chicago's entertainment industry. His expertise helped create safer environments while providing employment opportunities for military veterans transitioning to civilian careers. The club's success had attracted attention from legitimate investors interested in expanding the concept to other cities. Multiple offers had been made for franchise opportunities, but I had declined them all in favor of maintaining personal control over the business culture and operational standards that made Crimson Knights special. Most importantly, I had learned that justice and revenge were fundamentally different concepts. Revenge would have involved destroying Marcus through illegal or unethical means, leaving me morally compromised and legally vulnerable. Justice required patience, planning, and faith in legal systems that sometimes work slowly but ultimately respond to truth and evidence. The night Marcus was arrested, I had felt overwhelming relief rather than celebration. Seeing him in handcuffs provided closure, but it was the knowledge that he could never hurt anyone else that brought true peace. His conviction protected future victims while validating the experiences of those he had already harmed. Standing in my club, surrounded by friends, employees, and customers who had become part of an extended family, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from complete devastation to genuine happiness. The woman Marcus had tried to destroy no longer existed, but she had been replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more capable than her predecessor. My phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa Chen, a young entrepreneur who was opening her first restaurant with guidance from my mentorship program. Her grand opening was scheduled for next month, and she wanted to host the celebration at Crimson Knights. Messages like hers arrived regularly from women whose businesses were thriving because they had access to support and resources that had been unavailable to me during my original struggles. The ripple effects of my recovery had created opportunities for dozens of other women to succeed in industries dominated by predatory practices and unethical competitors. Every successful business launch felt like validation that my suffering had been transformed into something beneficial for others facing similar challenges. As I prepared to close the club for the evening, I walked through each section, appreciating the physical space that represented so much more than square footage and equipment. Every detail had been chosen to create an environment where people felt safe, respected, and valued. The atmosphere reflected my commitment to building something positive from the foundation of my worst experience. Looking back at the woman I had been 2 years ago, broken and desperate in my childhood bedroom, I could barely recognize the person who had allowed trust to become vulnerability. The healing process had required acknowledging my own role in enabling Marcus's betrayal without accepting blame for his criminal choices. The scar tissue from emotional trauma had proven stronger than the original innocence it replaced. I would never again sign documents without reading them completely. Never again assume business partners shared my ethical standards, and never again mistake charm for character. These were valuable lessons learned at an enormous cost, but they had ultimately made me more effective rather than more cynical. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as I continued expanding the mentorship program and exploring opportunities to help other crime victims navigate the complex process of rebuilding their lives. The experience with Marcus had taught me that recovery required active participation rather than passive waiting for healing to occur naturally. Marcus Sterling was now just a number in the federal prison system. His empire of lies and theft reduced a cautionary tale told in business schools and law enforcement training programs. His name would be remembered only as an example of how arrogance and greed eventually lead to destruction when they encounter intelligence and determination. My name, Helen Parker, would be remembered for something entirely different, for refusing to accept defeat, for transforming pain into power, for proving that victims could become victors through patience and planning. Most importantly, for demonstrating that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied when the right person refuses to give up. The story that began with betrayal and theft had ended with conviction and recovery. The woman who had lost everything had regained more than she ever imagined possible. The club that started as an instrument of revenge had become a foundation for helping others avoid similar tragedies. Standing in the quiet space that had witnessed perfect justice unfold, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that sometimes if you plan carefully and never give up, good truly does triumph over evil in the most complete and permanent way possible. As I turned off the lights and locked the doors of Crimson Nights, I carried with me the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to build, rather than destroy, to heal, rather than harm, to lift others up, rather than tear them down. Marcus Sterling had taught me what kind of person I never wanted to become, and in doing so, had helped me discover exactly who I was meant to be. I want to ask you something that's been on my mind since sharing this story with you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone you trusted completely betrayed that trust in a devastating way? How did you find the strength to move forward and rebuild your life after such a profound disappointment? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with overcoming betrayal and finding justice in your own life. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about resilience, justice, and the power of never giving up on yourself. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's possible to transform your worst experiences into your greatest strengths. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for being part of this community of people who believe that justice and healing are always possible, even when the path seems impossible to navigate. I hope my experience gives you strength and inspiration for whatever challenges you're facing in your own life. Until next time, remember that your story isn't over yet, and sometimes the best chapters come after the most difficult ones.